This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll restart that again. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I would ask at this time if anybody has any additions to the agenda. I would ask for an approval of the agenda as presented.
Moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Contrary minded? Okay, the motion is approved. Thank you. Our first item is Elm Court zoning, and I'm going to hand things over to Terry to take us through his presentation that will provide some context for council. Over to you, Terry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So what I intended to do this evening is just to give some background, starting from the Tamarack subdivision was developed and sort of the history around the considerations of rezoning and planning reports and other applicable materials related to Elm Court and the properties, the vacant properties on Elm Court. So this map indicates the vacant properties that are under consideration. So the properties are 141 to 149 Elm Court. With respect to land acquisition, in 1960, there was 1,000 people living in Port Hawkesbury. By 1970, there was 5,000, and there was a huge housing shortage. Tamarack subdivision was developed in 1969, and as a result of the employment from Gulf Oil, from Nova Scotia Power, from store of paper, from all the industry in Point Tupper primarily. So in 1974, Gulf Oil gave its properties that it had owned in Tamarack subdivision to the town. So there was a transfer of land in May of 1974 from Gulf Oil to the municipality of the town of Port Hawkesbury. The reason I bring that up, because it's been discussed a few times about designated parkland and things like that. It's very clear in the deed that the grantor, who is Gulf Oil, covenants with the grantees that the grantee shall have quiet enjoyment of lands, and that said lands, and that the said grantor has a good title in free, simple, to the lands, and the right to convey them as hereby conveyed, that they are free from encumbrances, and that said grantor will procure such further assurances as may be reasonably required. So I bring that forward because there was no conditions on that transfer of land. It didn't have to remain parkland. There was no stipulations with respect to that transfer of land when it occurred. The next time from my review of looking at this in early 2000s, we again had some buildup of industry, some expansions of industry in Point Tupper. There was another demand for housing within the town of Port Hawkesbury. There was a developer came forward and wished to purchase those lands, 141 to 149, and there was some public concerns were raised. Planning Advisory Committee, Council had instructed Eastern District Planning to create a planning report. The planning report, the recommendation from that, or the conclusion from that report, was this planning staff recommends that the town continue to consider lots 141 to 149 Elm Street as surplus to the needs of the town. However, before selling the properties or as a condition of sale, a solution to the stormwater runoff issue to be obtained and implemented. This may include retaining some of the lots for drainage or improving pipe storm sewer. So as a result of that, there was the town had hired Straight Engineering to do an engineering report on those lands. So the results of that engineering report, and I'm summarizing because all of these are fairly long reports, but under development consideration, which I think is appropriate for this evening, Development of the property should consider the type of house to be constructed on each lot. Because the lots generally slope away from Elm Court, the setback distance should be minimal and meet the minimum setback distance of zoning bylaw. A backsplit house would be best suited for these properties with a full 2-story exposure on the south elevation. Backyards could be maintained existing grades near the south boundaries of the property to minimize required fill on the lots and to eliminate the need for expensive retaining walls. The conclusion is, it's concluded that Elm Court drainage problems can be corrected with a combination of above ground drainage, swales leading to a piped underground storm water sewer system, which could be connected to the existing storm sewer network in the area. Costs of and limitations of the system have been presented in the above discussion. So there is discussion on that issue. There has been some work on drainage done since that point in time, but that was the recommendation at that time. The total cost of the system, as detailed in the report, was $34,000. That was in 2005 terms. I've asked Straight Engineering to reconcile that cost to try to put that in 2021 dollars. So the indication is that it's roughly about it. They estimate about 2.5 times that cost. So in today's dollars, that'd be $87,000. Yeah. So that was the So that was 2005 report and EDPC report and the 2005 engineering report. Going forward to 2020, the town of Port Hawkesbury put a number of vacant properties on up for sale. We had an agreement with a realtor. We advertised properties for sale. We did advertise some of the properties on Elm Court. Again, there was concerns raised by the residents on Elm Court and Birch Court, which is the street below Elm Court, and backs onto and shares some common properties with Elm Court. So the town had taken the properties off for sale because of the concern, and again met as council and decided to move forward with consideration of rezoning that space to open space. Eastern District Planning was requested to provide a staff report on the rezoning options for Elm Court, and that EDPC staff report was presented to the Planning Advisory Committee. The Planning Advisory Committee reviewed the report and did not agree with the conclusions and made a recommendation to council to rezone the lots 141 to 149 Elm Court. So the conclusion from the report was that the R2 zoning of these lots allow for a unique solution to addressing the housing and green space needs for the town, encouraging denser residential developments on a portion of the lots should allow for the total potential housing capacity to remain the same as if all lots were developed as a single unit dwellings. But with the added retention of green space currently on the lots through a redesignation to open space. The exact proportion of lots recommended to be redesignated are currently inconclusive and should be further investigated. So the report from planning was that they felt that some lots should be developed. There should be some lots that were retained for as open space or green space. But the PAC had determined that the request for consideration council would be to rezone all properties open space. So the council went through the planning bylaw and the just a second here. Yeah, so the town of Port Hawkesbury, working with our planners at Eastern District Planning, created amendments to the Town of Port Hawkesbury Municipal Planning Strategy and Land Use Bylaw, REL Elm Court lots 141 to 149. We went through that planning process. There was first reading, there was public hearing, and then the town, after public hearing, adopted the rezoning amendments. The rezoning amendments were forwarded to the minister for his approval, and we received on September 14th letter back from the minister. And the letter back from the minister indicates, and I'll read, have reviewed the proposed amendments and other supporting documents that were submitted. After careful consideration of the potential impact of these amendments, I've concluded that I cannot approve the documents submitted. The amendments are not reasonably consistent with the provincial statement of interest regarding both infrastructure and housing, Municipal Government Act Schedule B. So basically, our recommendation to make the amendments was not consistent with the provincial statements of interest. So, and that is the purview of the minister, with recommendations from staff to do that. So just to go in to say why it's not consistent. So there's 4 reasons why the minister did not feel that the application was consistent. First of all, the lots are in an area serviced by town utilities. So by designation of the lots as open space, the municipality may not be making the best use of municipal infrastructure. Provision 1A requires municipalities to enable higher density developments and infill developments on vacant land. Secondly, he said, by preventing any development from occurring on these lands, on these lots, growth may be directed in areas further from town center and the existing services. This would not be consistent with the provision 1B that requires planning documents to discourage development from leapfrogging serviced areas to unserviced areas. Consideration, development pressure is increasing in communities across the province as people are choosing to move from less densely populated places because of COVID-19 pandemic. The information provided with this proposed amendment, it is not clear if council is aware of how future developments will be accommodated. 4th bullet, serviced properties in an R2 zoning help municipalities meet basic, the basis of this statement, which is to provide a range of housing types, as well as provision 2, which requires planning documents to enable higher densities. From the information provided with the proposed amendment, it is not clear if the impact on these components of the statement have been considered by council. So your worship, that is a summary of documents up to including the receipt of the indication of the minister's decision.
Okay, thank you very much, Terry. So at this point, I'd like to open up the floor for some discussion from council with regard to the provincial letter that we received with regard to our rezoning request. Maybe we'll start with Mark. Councillor McIver.
Yes, Your Worship. I guess a question through you to Terry. This, I guess, refusal from the minister, and it's, if I got this right, it's my understanding that we can't appeal this. Is that correct?
To you, your worship, that's to my knowledge, it's not appealable. So John Bain, I requested information from John, and John indicated that the decision is not appealable.
Okay, so I guess going back to 2005, if my memory is, it's not as good as it used to be, but we discussed these 9 lots in 2005, and I believe Councillor McDougall was there also. And I know the town had did some work for drainage, which was more of a problem. There was 3 lots that were originally, I guess, taken out of that section because of the water issues, and we put drainage down to, I guess, White Birch Drive or whatever it is down below in the cul-de-sac, and we put that drainage in. And I think I mentioned it before, and maybe we got greedy, but could we not reapply and have these 3 lots designated as open space? Because they were the initial lots, I think. Like, I don't know how the rest of council feels, but I do remember the conversations back in 2005 that those 3 lots where we done the work to bring the water down to the other cul-de-sac, and it seemed to help an awful lot when that was done. So, I mean, if we can't appeal it.
So Councillor McIver, you're suggesting a resubmission with a different kind of proposal?
Yes. Like for the 3 lots that were initially, I believe, discussed on and we did work on to alleviate the water problem.
Sure. Terry, could you go back to the slide of the property just so we can, like, I guess, just to make sure we're understanding Councillor McIver's suggestion. So you're referring to, Councillor McIver, you're referring to the 3 lots on the very corner where all that green space is, like the.
Yes, it was.
The unwooded lots. Okay.
Yeah, it would be directly, I guess, Fergus Dearden's house at that time, George McDonald's, and the house next to it, I believe. They were really, there was a lot of water going into their back properties. And that's how we kind of, the town went in and did some drainage and put some pipes in and stuff. And I think actually Straight Engineering mentioned that in their report. And maybe if we reapply with those 3, they may accept it. Because I know there is in the report too that there's, I guess if we put the land for sale, there has to be kind of a covenants on it that certain types of homes can only be built and certain style or whatever's in there. So, I mean, I'm open to suggestions from the rest of council, but I just thought maybe that might be easier for the minister to approve than all 9.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McIver. Did you want to add anything before I call on anyone else?
No, that's fine.
Okay, Councillor Coyne, you have your microphone on. Did you want to go next?
Through you, Your Worship, I just would like to comment on some of the comments that Councillor McIver has just made. So, me living in this neighborhood for the last 10 years, I got to know the neighbors fairly well, and I got to know George McDonald fairly well. And even after the town fixed or didn't fix or tried to fix the drainage problem, George had to go out by hand, dig a whole new French drain across his property, across the one next door, and over to Roy Sturmey's property. So that's 3 houses involved in that French drain. Then George took the part of the French drain between his property and his neighbor's property. And still to this day, it's still quite wet. I won't say it's a swamp, but it's quite wet. So I appreciate the work done in the past. I just don't think what was done was sufficient from living here and seeing what goes on every year. Also, those 3 properties that we're talking about, 141 to 143, if you look at that property, you're not fitting a very big house on there without backfilling a lot. And if you put a house at 142 or 141, you're going to be looking right in the bedroom windows of two houses at an elevation. So I personally would have a hard time accepting any buildings on 141, 142, and 143 for those reasons. That's all I'll say for now. I would like to go last on Terry's presentation, please.
Okay, Councillor McDougall?
Yes, Your Worship, thanks. Like I say, I'm at work, but I recall what Councillor McIver was talking about back in 2005. And if we can send through just those three lots, I would agree with that. If the minister would maybe agree with the three lots as opposed to all the lots.
Okay, Councillor McDougall, just for clarity, you're referring to the three lots that Councillor McIver was referring to, not Councillor Aucoin.
The lots that the water problem is involved with, yes.
Okay, so you're agreeing with Councillor Aucoin about the challenges that he's outlined?
Yes, we have. Well, I suggest that we fix the challenges. Yes, fix the problem. It's not fixed.
Okay, I understand now. So, going back to the straight engineering report, all of the water challenges would have to be remediated before those lots could be, I guess, considered for development. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to add anything else, Councillor McDougall?
No, not at this time, Your Worship.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor McCrory, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Terry. Terry, can you just elaborate on what the supporting documents were that were submitted to the minister?
Submitted to the minister was the two planning reports. So it was the report of this year and the report from March of 2005.
And do you know, it was anyone with the planning, the Provincial Department of Planning or senior planners, were they in touch with the Eastern District Planning Commission to review this rezoning request?
Not to my knowledge, but John Bain is with us, and I'd ask that John respond to that through the mayor.
Thank you, John.
So the senior planner would have discussed both the amendments that were presented at the time, the waterfront and the Elm Court, but just from a process point of view.
Okay, thank you, John. Your Worship, when I read the letter from the minister, I had a sense that there was really very little context that he was providing a reply to us. And okay, I appreciate that the Eastern District Planning Commission documents from 2005 and 2021 were forwarded. But for the minister to, make comments about, does council really appreciate what they're doing with making this change? I guess I can appreciate where he might be coming from without the context of what has gone on with constituents and with tenants in that area since 2005. I appreciate that it's not appealable. There's not a formal appeal process to the decision. But what my suggestion is, and what I'd like us to consider, is to send a letter back to Minister Lohr with context around what conversations have taken place. Like, it's not that this is a decision that council has taken lightly. It's a decision that council has taken after much input from, as I say, the tenants in the Tamarack subdivision, and particularly around the Elm Court area. So, so that's my recommendation, that council would send a letter in that regard, and copy the letter to our MLA, Alan McMaster, as well. I don't think it's inappropriate for us to make that, to send that letter and see what response we get from that, and then make a decision based on that response. Okay, how do we go forward? But I think our first stance should be sending a letter.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Would you like to reframe that in the form of a motion for consideration of council?
I'd like, sure, I'd make a motion that council send a letter to Minister Lohr providing context regarding the rezoning application for the Elm Court subdivision lots 141, 149. With a copy to Deputy Premier McMaster.
Thank you. Okay, noted. So we do have a motion that's been put on the floor by Deputy Mayor McCrory. Is there anybody who would like to second this motion?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Councillor McIver?
Yep.
Oh, sorry, Councillor McDougall, go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship, through you. Thank you. I'm just getting back to the three lots. I think the three lots that we were talking about, that Jason, Councillor Coyne, and Councillor McIver were talking about, were the same three lots. I'm understanding, is that correct? That they're the same three lots, so.
No, actually, so Councillor McIver, can you clarify for Councillor McDougall's benefit which lots you were discussing, where you were suggesting that we could potentially look at resubmitting a green space application for just three lots, but I thought that you meant the three green spaces. But could you I guess clarify that for Councillor McDougall?
Yes, Your Worship, through you. Jason had mentioned lots 141 to 143. I'm not sure if it was 142, 143, and 144 that were the problems, but I know there was three. And I know that we brought drainage down in between two houses into Birchwood Court.
But I guess, Your Worship, I think that the two councillors are talking about the same three lots regardless of the number. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that is the first three lots that we see on this, I guess, on this map here.
That's correct.
141, 142, and 143. So your suggestion, Councillor McIver, was to resubmit an application to have just those three properties rezoned?
Yes, there's green space.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so back over to you, Councillor McDougall.
No, that's fine, Your Worship. Thank you. I got my answer. Thanks.
Do you have any questions or comments with regard to the motion that's currently on the floor to have a letter of context sent to Minister Lohr, CC, to our MLA and Deputy Premier Alan McMaster?
I'm in favor of if there's another motion for the three lots. I don't think I'm in favor of this one.
Okay. Councillor Coyne, well, we don't have a motion to yet with regard to Councillor McIver's suggestion. So right now we're just going to continue with the motion that's currently on the floor. Councillor O'Coin?
So I appreciate what Deputy Mayor Corey is saying, and the letter, Terry, if you could bring that letter back up and highlight the last two paragraphs. Where it says that, you know, the minister doesn't necessarily believe that how I'm understanding this is the minister doesn't think that we've actually thought this out and what the impact would be. And that's quite the contraire. We've spent a lot of time on this and we've thought this out. We've spoken to the residents. We as council have discussed it a lot. And we as council, all 5 members voted in favor to rezoning this. And to have the minister say that he doesn't feel that we really understand what we're doing or that we haven't really researched it enough, I just wonder if the minister didn't get the context like Deputy Mayor is saying. So I would definitely support Deputy Mayor's letter in stating, you know, what we actually did do and that we did think about this and we have put some work into it. We have spoke to residents. And what really gets me is that we've gone through 2 public hearings and not one negative comment, and then we received this letter. So yes, I fully support Deputy Mayor McCrory in the letter and the context.
Thank you, Councillor Coyne. Councillor McIver, do you have any questions or comments on the motion?
Yes, Your Worship, through you. I appreciate a letter that the Deputy Mayor is saying that should be sent. But like again, I don't think we can appeal it. And even by sending a letter today, and even with the information that we have from the engineers, that engineering, I guess, can fix the water problems. So the lots would still be saleable, I guess, at that time, and the particular homes that were going to be built. So I don't see any point in the letter because I'm sure the minister knows that you can pretty much build a house on a stump today with the engineering. But I would agree, I would like to reapply for the 3 that were the most problem ones to be open space.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Councillor McIver. Sorry, did you want to add more to that? I apologize for cutting you off.
No, that's fine, Your Worship.
Okay.
Your Worship.
Oh, go ahead, Councillor McDougall.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm wondering about the Municipal Government Act, where that comes into effect here. Are we going against the Municipal Government Act by doing this? Did the minister suggest that?
Yes, that was outlined in the letter, Councillor McDougall.
I call the question, Your Worship.
Your Worship, I'm just curious if Councillor McDougall could clarify what his comment was there about the Municipal Government Act.
That was a question, Deputy Mayor. I asked if I didn't comment on anything. I asked a question. Was it involving the Municipal Government Act? I wanted an answer from maybe through the mayor, from Terry. Maybe.
Sure. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, so Terry, if you can refer to the part of the letter with regard to the Municipal Government Act, just for clarity for council.
Yeah, the reference is with respect to the statement of provincial interests. So we were advised of this when we had sent in the amendments, that there could be issue with this because of just with respect to planning strategy issues. We would be against typical planning strategy issues, which are stated in the statements of provincial interest with respect to planning. So that's where that comes in, and that's an interpretation by the Minister of the statements of provincial interest. And the expert on this field is John Dane. So if John, if we want more clarification, I'd ask John to comment.
Sure. John, do you have any comments maybe that could add some clarity to that reference?
Sure. There are 5 statements of provincial interest. They relate to drinking water, flood risk areas, agricultural lands, infrastructure, and housing. And so it's the last 2 statements of provincial interest with respect to infrastructure and with respect to housing that any amendment to a municipal planning strategy has to be reasonably consistent with all 5 of those statements, and they found that it was not reasonably consistent with the 2.
Thank you, John. Is there any other questions of clarification required?
Yes, Your Worship. So the proposal by Councillors McDougall and McIver is to resubmit to have 1, 41, 42, and 43 rezoned to be green space. Is that correct?
There's no motion yet made, but
no, sorry, Your Worship.
that is the context of the discussion. Yes.
So as far as green space, the only way they're green is they're full of trees. But that's not clear green space. It's the other lots, non-143, that are actually green space. That it's actually lawn, it's grass that gets mowed. And so if we're going to create green space on 141, 42, 43, I guess we'd have to go in and cut down all the trees there as well. So anyhow, I was just wanting to clarify that.
Okay.
Your Worship, if I could make just one comment with respect to, before we tie ourselves down to numbers, and I know we're in discussion on a motion.
Sure. I guess, yeah, just one moment, Terry. I guess just so we are, like, we're kind of cross-pollinating 2 different discussions here. If council has any other comments or questions with regard to the motion that Deputy Mayor McCrory has put forward with regard to a letter of context, if you do have any other questions or comments with regard to that motion, let's deal with that. But Terry, does your comments relate directly to that motion or to the other comment?
No, Your Worship, you're absolutely right. I was off track on with respect to another potential.
No worries. No
So
worries.
through you, Your Worship, I would like to,
Right.
to intervene here a little bit. Now, I feel very strongly in favor with Deputy Mayor, because when you read the letter back from the minister, it tells me from what they're saying is that they did not have enough information from what we did. I'm reading that and they're thinking that we didn't do our homework. We didn't have public consultation, and we did. And that's what I'm getting from this letter, is that they feel that we didn't do our homework here. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, please.
So Councillor O'Coin, I guess just Terry, like with regard to the package that was sent forward, there is due process with regard to putting forward an application like this. So like the minister, I would assume that the minister would understand that process, but Terry, maybe you can comment further on that.
Yeah, no, thank you. So the issue that the minister is referring to is the bullets are related. Is with respect to utilizing service lands for parkland when there is vacant, unserviced land that could be used for parkland. And the other issue is by not utilizing service lots within a developed area, he's referring to what's called leapfrogging. So it's having to put in services into undeveloped areas, which is really where we're at. So for the most part, our service lots that are owned by the town are developed. So when we look for development, it will involve the installation of sewer and water, curb and road, and that infrastructure that's required for development. That's what he's referring to. So he's not referring to public consultation, unless I've missed something, or getting input but it's really considering that the really meat and potatoes of the planning issues, of town planning issues, of where you want your next development, and have you utilize the infrastructure to the best of its capability right now. And that's where it gets to, and that's where it gets to the statements of public interest.
Would there be an opportunity if council did, like, once we're done dealing with this motion, I guess if further context what were required, that could be provided in a new submission, I would assume.
Your worship, what I had indicated was actually the actual recommendation from council, from our planners, was to for some more study, was to look at developing green space in that areas, but maybe looking at what off those 9 lots, are there lots that can be developed in that R2 zone with some higher density housing, but leaving that, but going back to the planners and the engineering reports and making sure that we have, the optimal amount, and that comes back for public consultation again. So we would start the process again. Really, what would happen? We would ask EDPC for another report, looking at what are the best properties to market, what is the best properties for green space, and then we would have a new amendment that will go forward if that was a consideration after council consideration. So that's really what the recommendation was in the first place. So without name, it's not a great idea to name lots or anything at this point. I think we'd have to go back and study and see and get the detail that is required.
Okay, thank you, Terry. I guess, okay, with regard to the motion that's currently on the floor, is there any other comments or questions? I know, Councilor.
Yes, Your Worship, through you, I'm just.
Councilor McDougall, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering if the letter we're sending here, if it's just going to be ripped up and thrown in the garbage, if we can't appeal or we can't write any letter. I mean, I think we should do something that's constructive here. Is that just the end? If we move this motion and to send this letter for all the lots, then we were told it was unappealable.
That is correct. It's the decision is unappealable. So the letter would basically be sent for information.
Yes, Your Worship.
Do you want to clarify the intent of the letter you're suggesting, Deputy Mayor?
So I guess where I'm coming from, Your Worship, is I fully appreciate there's no formal appeal to this decision, but there's nothing that forbids us from sending correspondence to the minister for the purposes that I said previously. And if all we get back is a response that says, no, sorry, there's the decision. Okay, well, that's the decision that's made by the minister. At least council would have made every effort to go and see that this got passed as we committed to the residents out there. If it comes back with a no or not going to review from the minister, the suggestions that Councillors McDougall and McIver are making certainly would be something that that's the option that we may have to go forward. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor McCrory. And certainly, just for the benefit of council, this is we're not up against any kind of a timeline, so we can certainly take more than this current special meeting if needed, and continue to add this item for discussion. Terry's suggestion going back to the drawing board as well can be considered for council. But I guess for all intents and purposes of the motion that's on the floor, has council exhausted all comments and questions with regard to the motion? And if you have, please feel free to call the question.
Question.
Okay, the question has been called. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, contrary minded?
Nay.
Okay, we have one registered nay, and the motion is approved. So we will work on a letter and the draft of the letter will be circulated to council. And when council is pleased with a final draft, we will send that off to the minister, CC'd of course to our MLA and Deputy Premier Alan McMaster. Okay, so is there any other comments at this point, or would council like to defer this to future meeting pending the response to the letter? What is the wishes of council?
Sorry, Your Worship, what are you suggesting?
I'm just wondering if there's any other discussion on this item, or if council would like to wait to see what the response from Minister Lohr would be with regard to the letter that will be sent.
Your Worship, I would think we would want to wait for a response from Minister Lohr before discussing this further.
Sure. Is council satisfied with that? I guess go forward.
Yes, Your Worship, I thought that was part of the explanation
Sure.
of the motion. And
Sure.
I had my doubts about even supporting this, but I'm supporting it on the aspects that we are going to get a response, and I hope we will adhere to the response. And you know, I'm very confused over the whole issue, to tell you the truth.
Sure. Okay, Councillor McIver, are you okay with going forward with the letter and awaiting a response, and then we'll bring this back to council for further discussion?
Yes, Your Worship, the motion was carried. It's a form of appeal, which will come back, I'm sure, in the negative. So I guess that would end the discussions on this until we get that letter.
Sure. Councillor Coyne, are you okay with that go forward?
I am okay with that. I think one thing that's very important is if you look at the list of names, we have a fair-sized gallery here tonight. And I think it's very important for the residents who are here watching this either live or going to watch it later on video to understand that the town has put it forward to designate those 9 lots. We recommended it 5-0. The province has said no. So we have listened to the voices. We have put it forward. It's the province right now that's saying no. And we are still trying to go forward with the original ask of the residents. If that comes back no, then we will try a different avenue on different things. But I think it's important to know, for the people to know, that we are listening to them and we have tried this. And again, this is one of the reasons why we're having this meeting tonight, is so that everybody does know that the council is working for them. We're not taking this laying down, and we're going to try our best.
Thank you, Councillor Coyne. Is there any other discussion or items related to this agenda item before moving forward to the next? Deputy Mayor McCrory, you have your mic on?
Oh, sorry, Your Worship, no more comments.
Okay, no problem. Councillor McDougall and McIver, you guys are okay with moving forward?
Yes, Your Worship.
Perfect.
Yeah, fine.
Thank you, Councillor McDougall. Our next item on the agenda is bylaw review, so I'll hand things over to Terry. I know that in prior meetings, we wanted to dedicate some time to reviewing some of the bylaws that we are considering, but also to look at older bylaws that may need updating, or bylaws that are no longer, I guess, valid with regard to our current policies. So this evening, Terry has circulated our elected officials code of conduct policy that has not yet been adopted by council, but certainly we can discuss that or any other bylaws that council wishes to at this time. Terry, I'll hand things over to you for a review of this current one.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council has reviewed this bylaw, certainly past council and this current council as well, on several occasions. And so staff is looking for some direction on where we are to move with this draft policy. So I'll just review again on some of the areas, and I have the complete document and can provide any kind of clarity with respect to any of the paragraphs or if we want to get into that that kind of detailed conversation at this point in time. The staff is looking for a recommendation either to move forward with this, to amend this, or to shelve it and move on to something else. So we'd just like to, if possible, like to have a decision on or direction to council on what council wishes to do with this policy. So the purpose of the policy, the public expects the highest standards of professional conduct from members elected to local government. The purpose of the code is to establish guidelines for ethical and interpersonal conduct of members of council. Council is answerable to the community through democratic process, and this code will assist in providing for good government of the town of Port Hawkesbury. Members shall uphold the law at all times and seek to advance the common good of the town of Port Hawkesbury as a whole, while conscientiously representing the community that they serve. As well, to perform the functions of the office truly, faithfully, and impartially to the best of their knowledge and ability in accordance with the following core values: integrity, honesty, and objectivity. Accountability, being accountable, and leadership. The next paragraph talks about upholding the conduct as a means of promoting the standard of behavior expected of members and enhancing the credibility, integrity of council in the broader community. These are the items that you've seen referenced in the policy. We talk about code to be observed, dedicated service, respect for decision-making process, conduct at meetings, release of confidential information prohibited, gifts and benefits, use of public property, obligations to citizens, interpersonal behavior, community representation, good governance, good relationships, conflict of interest avoidance, report of breaches, corrective actions, compliance with the code, compliance with process, investigation of allegations, alleged breach of conduct, decisions reported to council, and options for remedial action and penalties for breach of code. The whole understanding of this is councils are considered professionals and self-regulating. So any kind of breaches, any discussion around this is done in public, as all discussions are with respect to councillors, and it's self-regulating. So I can certainly, again, critical on this is paragraph 13. Decisions reported to council and adoptions for remedial action. Where investigation is found for a probable breach, the complaint will be brought to council during a public meeting, censored where necessary by the MGA. Only council can decide that an action breach has occurred. Council shall rule on penalties to a member within 60 days of the breach. So it just goes back, and so this is very typical of other professional organizations with codes of conduct as a self-regulating body. So I bring it forward again to council, just again, just looking for some direction of where you wish to move with this policy.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Councillor O'Coin, go ahead. You have your mic on.
Through your worship to Terry, I support this. I think that we really should have a code of conduct in place. To be honest, my common council, I found it a little strange that there wasn't one. So I think that we should maybe catch up with the times and get this in place.
Your worship.
Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
If you'd be okay with this, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the elected officials code of conduct for the town of Port Hawkesbury.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Coyne, you have your mic on.
I'd second that.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion currently on the floor to adopt this bylaw for code of conduct. Is there any discussion on the motion that's currently on the floor? Any questions or comments?
Question?
Your worship, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a 14-day period. This would be considered policy. And so
Sure.
there's 14-day notice before it's adopted. So if it's the wish of council to move forward, I appreciate the motion, but if it's the wish of council to move forward, it's probably best to make that motion on at the November council meeting.
Oh, okay. Is council okay with that suggestion?
Yes.
Yes, your worship.
Mayor? Okay, perfect. So I guess if there happens to be any comments, questions, concerns between now and our next public meeting, feel free to contact Terry or myself, and this will be added to our next public meeting for a decision of council. Okay. Was there any other bylaws that we need to review, or council, is there any bylaws that we would like to, I guess, add to our list of to-dos? I know there's Councillor McDougall, I know that this is definitely something that is dear to you. So I guess, is there anything that you would mention? I'll hand this over to you.
No, your worship, but a lot of that stuff is covered on the province. I do support adopting the bylaw. It's covered, and we all did take an oath. Gotta remember that. But I do support the bylaw, yes.
Perfect. Councillor McIver.
Yes, your worship, I support the policy bylaw. I guess through you to Terry is to check our old bylaws and see if we don't have one there that's ancient, but something tells me there might have been something there.
Yeah, there could be an older one. I think, Terry, we may have access to a very old one. It's probably not in digital format.
No, probably not, but I guess at the time we adopt this new one, we would repeal any.
It would supersede the old one, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's some of our bylaws. I hope we've managed to get most of the bylaws that still refer to horse and cart, but anyway, that's great. So we will move this forward to our November public meeting.
Just a question for you, Mayor.
Sure, go ahead.
The committees we sit on, is that a bylaw as well? Like who shows up and the process if you can't show up, is that a bylaw?
Oh, okay. So you know what, this would be a good question for Councillor McDougall or Councillor McIver. Do we, like, in our current bylaws, is there, I know we were discussing recommendations that we were going to make to council with regard to committee work, but do we currently have any rules in place with any current bylaws with regard to Councillor Poyne's comment?
The only one, your worship, through you that I can recall is council's responsibilities of council, and it states in there, if I can recall right, like I'm like Councillor McIver, my memory's not as good as it used to be, but I think if you miss 3 meetings, I know council meetings, without a valid excuse, you're expelled from council.
Was there any rules in there with regard to like local committees or regional committee attendance?
Not that I recall, your worship.
Okay, so
Your worship.
Go ahead. Sure.
Are there not in their terms of reference for the committees? Is there not a stipulation or a condition about attendance? Maybe it's
I think
best.
there may be, you're right, there would be terms of reference that would cover each of the committee work and also
Through
regional committees.
you, Your Worship, to Terry, if Terry could just comment on that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Go ahead, Terry.
Yes, Your Worship. It is covered under terms of reference. There is a committee, there is a bylaw with respect to committees, which is outdated and should be reviewed. So what I can do this week is send out, we've reviewed before, sort of the older bylaws that haven't been reviewed yet, just so we get current again with what should be coming up. But this one has been outstanding for a while, and there is an existing code of conduct that applies primarily to staff, and it's more around conflict of interest and those types of things. But which should also come forward, especially now that we have a new code of conduct for our elected officials.
Okay, thank you, Terry. So that sounds, is council okay with that suggestion?
Yeah, Your Worship, now that I think of it, we were kind of putting this off because the province was looking at code of conduct, or the Federation of Municipalities, I forget which. And
It would be the province.
Yeah, I think we were taking a position, let's wait and see what they came forward with before we adopted this. Now, that's my recollection now, as I'm thinking about it.
So I guess we can petition the province to see where they've landed with regard to code of conduct and have that information available to council for our November meeting.
Sounds good. Yep.
Any other comments or questions? If there are none, a motion of adjournment.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Seconded, I think, by Councillor MacIver. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Okay, Terry, you can stop recording, and I don't know if there are any media that require questions. I feel like maybe not. I think Bill left. I think he was our only media person here.